Welcome back to Bonded Voices, Gen X, otherwise known as Season 2. Today we're going to talk about Mr. Mom and the social impacts. What did we learn from Mr. Mom? I'm Greg.
This is Loren.
And I'm Ian.
So staying in line with our topic of Gen X, there's a classic movie in the mid-'80s called Mr. Mom. And the premise of that movie was a family, suburban family, where the father finds himself out of work, the mother goes back to work, and it's the antics of what the father experienced in raising the kids, which at that point in time were stereotypically labeled as women's responsibilities. Hence, the characters in the movie, all of Mr. Keaton's friends, were all the housewives in the neighborhood.
You know what I love about our Bonded Voices podcast is the fact that we're, one, able to skirt subjects that people may stay away from. Politics, sex, religion, all that sort of stuff. But also to making observations about things in our lives that, and it's not to critique, right? We do it to hopefully improve situations. You know, I don't think any of our episodes so far we've been on there to beat anybody up.
No, I think our whole goal is to help others.
Yeah.
And
happier, healthier, wiser through conversation, right?
Yeah,
so,
shed light on some topics that some people don't know how to talk about, that need to be talked about, that we as a society tend not to talk about.
So this subject came because obviously we cover a lot of things in life. And one of the subjects that came up was the movie Mr. Mom, and it was what, Michael Keaton and who was the lady?
Terry Garr.
Terry Garr,
yep.
who actually, God rest her soul, she just passed away. But she was a big influence in that whole Gen X movie era. Mm-hmm. Like Terry Garr was pretty big in there. And then we look around at our society today. We just had an election where Donald Trump ran against Kamala Harris, and there's so much talk that it was a misogynist vote. And I don't think it was that at all, because, I voted for Margaret Thatcher. Indira Gandhi is one of my heroes, Pakistani Prime Minister. I think there's a lot of really capable women out there who are amazing at that sort of thing. But at the same time, the critique of the election is really unfair to say it was misogynistic. And that a lot of that is coming from women.
I think that there is a human trait when someone is unhappy with the outcome is to trying to find fault in the decision that has been made.
Yeah.
And so if it's a tough question, such as, and I don't think the goal of this particular episode was to get deep into the most recent election, but it brings up some very important topics. So if one side is always going to lose, one side is always going to win. And so if the side that loses chooses to, you know what, let's just go after the low-hanging fruit. Let's blame it on something else while we try and figure out what really happened. And I think that the misogynistic, is there misogyny in the world? Absolutely there is.
But I would think that there's just as much, misandry, just as there is misogyny.
Ooh, wow.
Word,
that's pretty good.
Yeah.
But I think there's just as much. I think, like you were saying, it's low-hanging fruit. I don't believe that. So if you don't, the other side is not listening to the argument of we picked a better, who we thought was a better candidate. So the same thing, everyone that didn't vote for Obama was racist. No, because maybe they have a different opinion of what they wanted to be governed by. It's not, everything doesn't boil down to misogyny and racism, and you can have an opinion that's not based on that.
I just wanted to point something out, that the Democratic Party actually did not choose
Yeah, that's very true.
Kamala Harris as
very good point.
Right.
So Kamala Harris is a Gen Xer.
Correct.
She's born in that era. And
Right on the edge, isn't she?
Yeah, I think she's right on the edge.
I think she's younger than me, though, I think, isn't she?
Well,
Who isn't?
No, I don't. I think she might be a little bit older than you are. I think.
I don't think so.
I thought she was 60, but
Well, maybe. So she's right on the edge, okay. But so here's a part of of maybe a critique is, well, no, this was the critique of the press on both sides of the fence is what is her skill set, right? What has she been skilled to do? So the feminist movement created power for women, but they, in a lot of ways, I think, disempowered them because they didn't want them to be excellent. They just wanted them to be, I am woman, hear me roar.
right. I see it in the corporate world a lot where it's a quota that we have to, this DEI, we have to have so many of this type of person in this type of position. And it's not about the qualities, it's about hitting a quota. And it's unfair because people that are put into positions that they're not qualified for and they don't know how to handle those situations. So then it's not just because they're of this subset of people that they're bad. It's just they're not cut out for that type of position, but we have to have people in that position.
It definitely sheds light on is the best person to fill that role being selected? Or are there criteria that don't take into account the person's ability to complete the role that impact whether or not they're put in that position?
In a meritocratic system, it should be based on merit, but we don't live in that type of society right now. It's all about...
Well, hopefully that's changing. And one of the points of this podcast, our listenership is mainly men, middle-aged, right? That's our key demographic. Some older, some younger. For them, I think there's a lot of confusion about women out there. And I don't think they delve into the idea of how did today's woman become who she is and how she is. Greg, you pointed out something earlier when you asked me if I had sisters. Mm-hmm. Is that we're all affected by our environment. So I just had the main women in my life were my mother and my grandmother. Mm-hmm. I didn't have sisters. I didn't have those peers of sisters. The only girls that age were girlfriends, right? So when you don't have someone who is a non-sexual being in your world, being a sister. Like you have mothers and grandmothers who are non-sexual to look up to, but they're not your peers in that way.
Sure.
And I think if I had a sister, we would probably have driven her to not drink, but be better at whatever she did. Like me and my brothers did. If you're going to play football, it was like run faster, be smarter, hit harder. Whatever that was. And you guys can answer this. With your sisters, did you drive them like that?
Well, there was definitely competition. I have one of each, brother and sister. And
right.
So a little bit of an age difference. The two of them are closer in age, and I'm a number of years younger. But there was definitely competition back and forth. There was involvement back and forth. And I think about the way that we've raised our kids, a mix of girl and boys.
Yeah.
And there's not been any treatment. 99% of the treatment has not been dependent upon the sex of the child. It's been, okay, you want to play the sport? Great. Let's be the best at that sport. Okay, you want to compete in this? Great. Let's do that. There's not any, oh, well, I wouldn't expect my son to do well in home ec.
Right.
There's nothing like that. So from my point of view, I think that there is, it's interesting, the stereotypical roles. And then I start to think, well, how long have those roles been in place? In order to create a stereotype that we saw in Mr. Mom, the movie, where Terry Garr goes to work and Michael Keaton stays home and all the funny scenes and all of the chaos that ensues, But I wonder if, when were those stereotypes created? We were talking about who cooks dinner, and go generationally down the line.
Was that one of the first movies that made men look stupid, like they couldn't do any of the home roles? Or was there some before then?
I think this was before then. I think it poked fun initially at Michael Keaton's lack of understanding. For example, there's a scene where he goes to drop some of the kids off at school, and he enters the carpool lane or the drop-off lane. He enters from the north and exits from the south, but he's supposed to do the opposite.
Right.
And the school switches it during the day, and so then he's confused. And then later on in the movie, he's actually the person that's the person, like the crossing guard out there, that's directing everybody else. So it's this, I wouldn't say coming of age, but it's definitely a learning the roles and becoming more proficient at it. And so it didn't paint him as a stupid light, much like the Disney television shows that our kids grew up with, where in the typical nuclear family, the father was played as an idiot.
Yeah, like Married with Children.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's probably one of the first ones, Married with Children. Before that, you had The Cosby Show that treated the mother and father as this unit that worked together. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think Married with Children was probably the first one where they showed the father. But I want to go back to what you were asking about kids and how you raise them. I was too far away from, I have 4 sisters, and I was so far removed in age. I have some that are older than me, and I have some that are younger than me, and the age gap's quite different, so I wasn't around to spur them in to do whatever they're doing. But I know for my 2 daughters, I have actually pushed them in ways that I actually was asked, like, are you trying to raise a new Hannah, like the
Not
fighter?
Hannah Montana.
No, there was a Special Forces movie about a girl named Hannah. Because I had my daughters doing jiu-jitsu. They were fighting boys. Like, I put them in positions or in sports that were typically male-dominated sports, and they came to me and go, I kind of want to do more girly sports. I'm like, perfect. But if you're going to do not a girly sport, a sport that's a girl's sport, that if you're going to do it, you have to be good at it.
So is that for protection, the jiu-jitsu and that sort of thing?
Is
that your fear to make them strong?
I wanted them to be able to protect themselves at all times, but also it gave them a sense of confidence. I know they struggled with confidence at a young age. So when they were in there and they knew nothing could really bother them. They're out there on a mat wrestling boys and with a huge crowd around them screaming. If you can handle that, like they both did, life is kind of more subdued than that.
So I think that one of the things the sexual revolution did, and the baby boomer families did to daughters, and I think it's a disservice, is they empowered them to be very sexual, which I don't think is that overt sexuality, acting like a man, and I'll just add, like most dumbass men, where they just want to sleep with everything that walks. I don't think that's helped, because you see in the numbers there's probably more than ever, not probably, there is more than ever 40, 50 and 60-year-old women who are single and have no real chance of finding a partner. It's slim to none at that point in time. There's a couple of guys who've done podcasts and also shows on YouTube, and one of the guys, if my memory kicks in of who it is, he actually passed away, but he was very controversial because he used to matchmake between men and women. And so these women would come on maybe in their early 30s and say, he'd ask them first thing, what do you rate yourself as? And they would say, I'm a 10. He goes, you're not close to a 10. I'll tell you why. And he would break down a man who would be looking for a girl like that and how that guy would rate him. He said a 10 is someone who's under 26, is childless, has had very few boyfriends. That's what a man sees as a 10. He said, honey, you may see yourself as a 10, but if you come into me for me to find you a high profile man, a man with money, you're not looking at you as 10. Right? So that sexualization of women actually disempowered them to actually have what a lot of them end up wanting in their 40s, 50s, and 60s is a great relationship.
Well, society as a whole, we make stars and make people famous. So a good example of this is the Kardashian effect, right?
Or Paris Hilton, right?
Right. They made Kardashian in particular was a nobody until they had the sex tape, and the sex tape made her whole family billionaires. They made a bunch of billionaires out of a sex tape, which sexualizes women, puts them, and so all these young girls go, I want to be the next Kim Kardashian. I want to be famous. And we have TV shows about them and following them, and it just perpetuates this whole, like, that's an acceptable behavior. And then you watch them in their daily life and how they act. It would be unacceptable for my kids to behave that way, but we are promoting it as a society, going, this is a great show, it's on every channel, or whatever it is. And
so, bringing up the Kardashians, it's a fascinating look at, okay, sure, some of them have now created their own businesses and they're successful running those businesses, and so someone from the outside might look and say, wow, look at that individual. They've built this great business. They're an empowered business person. But when you start to peel the layers back on the onion and you realize, well, how did they get their initial start? And so it's look at this, but don't look at that. And I think where we are in a societal point of view is what's on the exterior matters so much more than the actual character of the person. To your point, Ian, the idea of the particular character you were talking about that was a high-profile matchmaker, was that person that said that they were a 10, were they looking for a sugar daddy relationship, or were they looking for a lifelong partnership with a husband?
Well, this is the funny thing, which is, I think with everything that's changed, women still find security in a man with a lot of money. Men find a partner in something that's pleasing to their eye. Like, I think, I don't know many guys who say, don't like the way my wife looks at all, but she's a great person. And women will always have a problem with a guy who's broke. And I don't think that's ever changed, because what you find is all these women are going out like the Kardashians, having all this plastic surgery and all that sort of thing. They're not doing it for other women.
No.
They're doing it for them to be more valuable to a man with more money. Now, again, we love to do these podcasts and have actionable takeaways for people and actually help solve problems. One of the things I think why this is really important is because, one, I don't think that redemption's beyond anyone on a religious side or even in just a cultural side. I think you can change things. And I think there's a lot of women out there and a lot of men who have been sold a lie. And I think this is both women and men, that you just have to show up. You don't have to bring anything to the table. You don't have to be good at anything. You just either got to be pretty or well-spoken or whatever it ends up being. But they lack the traits that make for a good long-term relationship.
So if we bring that back to the movie Mr. Mom, there was a scene in the movie where she has to go away for business. And so the husband's at home, making the household work, not getting any sleep, I think one of the kids is sick. Like, there's all kinds of fun chaos going on. And at one point, there's a scene where the boss of Terry Garr is actually wanting to make sexual advances on Terry Garr. She has no interest in it at all. She shuts him down. But at one point, Michael Keaton calls. And do you remember the line?
I don't remember.
Is that champagne I hear chilling in the background? You can hear that? Well, no, I can't hear it. But what's going on? Why do you have champagne in your room? And so there's this tension between the two of them. But then it actually brings them closer through these life changes that went on. It's really a great story that's very comedic, that touches on some pretty reasonably heavy topics through any economic cycle of this couple has 3 children. They do everything they can to maintain their lifestyle. He's out of work. She goes back to work. They figure out a way to make it work. And at the end of the movie, everybody's happy, where they've come together back as a unit.
Yeah.
She didn't go out and cheat on him like a modern day movie where everybody's cheating on everybody and finding the instant gratification instead of what's the long-term goal with our relationship.
See, I remember a Cosmopolitan study going back maybe 20, 25 years. And they asked, and these are obviously Cosmopolitan readers, that's men first, what have you ever had an affair on a girlfriend or a wife? And it was like 50% of men said yes. The stunning part was it was 72% of women. Of Cosmopolitan readers, right? So there's obviously, and this is in Britain, so it was obviously a particular demographic. And Cosmopolitan's obviously one of those magazines where it's all about how you look.
Right.
Yeah.
And raising
character.
how you look. There's no character involved at all, right? It's stupid story time. I care passionately about when I meet people who are lonely and looking, and it takes you about 2 minutes to understand why they're single and lonely. And I keep thinking to myself, is anyone going to tell them? And if they told them, would they pivot?
Well, I think that's very unique, like specific to each individual and their tolerance to change. Some people have a very fixed mindset of, I'm not going to make any changes, where other people might have a growth mindset where they're constantly learning and adapting and making changes. But I think that's a great question. I think some people, I think it goes back to be careful what you ask for, because you just might get it. As well, people might ask for something thinking that it will fulfill some other part of their life. So they think they want this, but in all actuality, maybe they really do enjoy the single life, but they're just looking for someone to have coffee with on a Wednesday morning.
Has anyone ever told women that, Greg, that just because men find you sexual doesn't mean that they find you valuable?
I think they find that out later in life. That's what they're finding, but I don't think they see it as that. They're always, why I only find the bad guys? Because
that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, you get what you advertise.
Yeah, and that's what I think is the biggest failing in what the baby boomer parents did to their daughters, is that they equip them with that sexuality, which looks great. It's really pleasing to the eye for us men, and maybe for women as well. But I don't think we've seen this level of loneliness and despondency.
Well, part of it is I think it was the beginning of our generation where divorce and people started.
Yeah, you mentioned this. Yeah,
started leaving their families. Families, we had up until the 60s and 70s, divorce was rare, and then it became rampant, and then it became, when we were in school, very few parents were divorced. I was one of the lucky ones to have divorced parents. My dad was married multiple times, and my mom a few times as well. Not anything against them, but most families that I was around, their parents stayed together.
Yeah. Now
it's, you look at, you ask our kids, how many parents are divorced? Oh, well, these people are divorced and these people are divorced.
So that brings up that's like throwing a grenade into the hand fire, or a hand grenade into the campfire, not a camp grenade into the hand fire. So, but that situation where there's a divorce that went on, my experience with that, watching from the outside, is a competition between each one of the parents. The term Disneyland dad comes up. who's going to be the disciplinarian, who's going to be the one that's really towing the line, and who's going to be the parent that wants to be the favorite. And then you take that even another step further of, well, you know what? I just want to be best friends with my kid. And that is where I think we're seeing a serious societal shift with regard to kids being raised by older versions of people that want to be their best friend. Rather than, no, this is a requirement. You live under my roof. You live by these rules. You will do this much homework. You will, all of the things that we were raised with. And I'd be interested to see if there's a higher percentage of issues with children. I'm not sure our kids' generation will see it, but it might be the immediate generation behind them, to see the children having a hard time with any type of authority at all.
Yeah.
Because they were raised with no authority.
Well, there's a lot of studies about having dads as part of the equation in raising family. So the crime statistics are, if the father isn't present, the kids are more likely to be involved with some type of law enforcement. The dropout rate of kids for single parents or without a dad in the family, more dropouts, less families or children that have no parent or no father in the situation, less of them graduate college. It goes statistic after statistic that the father being part of it and part of the discipline and showing them guidance and how to act, that is a big part of this. So I think one of the takeaways is you have to be involved in your family. And sometimes it's, showing discipline. Sometimes it's, you have to lead by example.
Well, and I think as the three of us sit around and have this cup of coffee, I'm sure that each one of us can come up with a point in time where we made the wrong decision as a parent.
Oh, yeah.
But we learned from it. We make adjustments. And so I don't think that any of us need to portray this level of perfectionism and we've got it right. I think it's good for the kids to see, man, Dad was totally emotional today. He lost his marbles on something. Oh, well, he was passionate about something that might have happened at work or something that, what have you, because that's natural. Kids are going to experience that as they grow up. And so I think a couple of the topics that we talked on tonight, and this was a great podcast, but Mr. Mom taught us how a couple comes together and deals with adversity, and the roles in which the parents played changed through the movie, but they made it work as a couple, rather than being so hard fast on, I will not do this, I will not do that, you will do this, you will do that.
See, for me, my takeaway, there's no hard, fast rules for what a relationship should look like. But I think, and I've counseled people on this through church as well, is when you find someone you love or you've fallen in love with, find out what they bring to the table. And it goes both ways. Women need stability because when a woman's barefoot and pregnant, she needs a strong guy around who is also going to be a provider. But men for the last 30 years have not been able to ask the adverse question is, okay, what do you bring to the table? I look great. What else you got? Right. And I see it at prom when these girls are cutting their skirts shorter and they're cutting their tops down and pushing their boobs up. And I keep thinking to myself, and I've even asked a couple of dads, like, where does this end? Because I don't know. It's fun for the moment and it's great to have a beautiful partner. But you go down that road, I think you end up lonely.
What's fascinating, and I think we talked about this in season 1.
Yeah.
Where high school prom, the guys will tend to dress up very formal, very traditionally formal clothes, maybe a sport coat, maybe a tie, long sleeve shirt, button down. So I just find that fascinating from a attraction to the opposite sex point of view.
Yeah. It's a tough subject. And it's one that hopefully we inspire conversation with you, our listeners, that you'll actually talk with others about it. Maybe send us a note online, bondedvoices.com, or on any of the places you listen to our podcast. So until next time, thanks for listening to Bonded Voices. I'm Ian.
This is Loren.
And I'm Greg.
And we'll see you next time.